I strongly doubt that I'm the ideal husband. My job is quite stressful, and there are times when I come home a bit grumpy. I'm certainly not the best provider either. I'm definitely no millionaire, but we manage fine. We have a nice home, 2 luxury cars, my wife has a closet full of beautiful clothes, and our 8-year-old daughter, Jennifer, has tons of expensive toys. Ultimately, I'm just a simple, hard-working guy who loves his wife and family. Linda and I have been married for nearly 12 years, and for the most part, those years have been heavenly. I say, for the most part, because, for the last couple of months or so, something just hasn't felt right between Linda and me. It's hard to pinpoint, but she's been acting strangely, somewhat aloof. On numerous occasions, without reason, she's found fault with something I did or said, which is just not like her. I've tried to discuss it, asking if she was upset with me for some unknown reason, but like many women, she insisted that nothing was wrong other than feeling a bit tired or having had a bad day. Initially, I thought I'd give her some time to work out whatever was bothering her. However, as time passed, her detached attitude became increasingly aggravating. As any married couple knows, a troubled relationship with your spouse affects intimacy as well. I've always worked hard to keep our love life spontaneous and exciting, often starting with gestures like bringing a dozen roses home after work. In the past, such gestures have led to a busy evening. Lately, though, my romantic efforts are met with mere thanks and a peck on the cheek. Instead of accepting my expressions of love for what they are, it's as if she thinks there's some feeble attempt to make up for something I did wrong. It's been weeks since Linda initiated any closeness, and my advances are either met with disinterest or the classic headache excuse. On the rare occasions when she agrees, she remains passive while I do all the work. As time passed, I found myself mentally detaching from the situation. I'd go home, play with my daughter, and pay as little attention to my wife as possible, which only made things worse. Feeling desperate, I began going over things in my mind when I had a minute or two at work. I thought back to when and how everything started. I tried to recall if I had done something that might have triggered the change in Linda's attitude but was coming up empty. I ran dozens of different scenarios in my head, attempting to analyze the cause and effect. The more I thought about it, the more one unthinkable explanation for Linda's behavior kept popping up. I wondered if it was possible. Could my wife be cheating on me? I told myself, no, she would never do such a thing. But every time I tried putting 2 and 2 together, it was coming up as 3, me, Linda, and a lover. I tried convincing myself there was simply no way, but you know what they say about curiosity. I did some reading on what signs to look for, differences in behavior, attire, schedules, and the like. Honestly, I hadn't noticed Linda wearing any revealing clothes or dressing up more, but then again, I only see her when I get home after work. Who knows how she dresses during the day? I also had no idea of her schedule. She's always running here or there, but for what? Again, who knows? When it came to her change in attitude, though, some of the symptoms sounded remarkably familiar. I considered hiring a private detective, but lacking concrete evidence, my thoughts were fueled only by suspicions, insufficient to justify the expense of a PI. So, I initiated my own investigation. Activities included calling the house during the day and discovering that she was home sometimes and not others. I then obtained an old external surveillance camera, discreetly mounting it beneath the garage eaves, connected to a hidden tape unit behind some paint cans. My objective was to spot any unfamiliar cars at the house. However, after 2 weeks, no such cars appeared. I observed my wife leaving the house a few times, claiming she was home all day, but the duration seemed too brief for any significant encounters, unless her supposed boyfriend possessed astonishing brevity. Perhaps these were minor errands she deemed insignificant to mention, not evidence of an illicit affair. As time passed with no proof of wrongdoing, my suspicions only intensified. Her worsening moods and the absence of intimacy for weeks left me frustrated. Approaching our 12th anniversary, I viewed it as an opportunity to inject some fun back into our relationship. Having not enjoyed a night of dinner and dancing for a long time, I hoped it might rekindle the spark in our marriage. Ready to give it a try, we arranged for Jennifer to stay at my parents' house for an uninterrupted evening. I booked a table at Plato's, one of Linda's favorite restaurants. As the maitre d' escorted us to our table, I hoped for the return of our old magic, but for some reason, Linda appeared a bit tense. Ordering a bottle of wine with dinner, I observed Linda starting to relax and revert to her old self. Our conversation became light and playful. After dinner, it was evident my lovely wife was eager to hit the dance floor. Although I suggested trying a new dance club that had opened recently, she managed to convince me to go to our usual spot, a nice venue with romantic lighting and a cozy dance floor catering to an older crowd. They played danceable music, sparing me any arm twisting. I'm not a bad dancer if I may say so myself, and this shared love for dancing was one of the things that brought Linda and me together. Securing a private table, we ordered drinks, took a sip each, and then strolled over to showcase more than just the two-step. It felt like old times, and we both had a great time. After almost an hour of continuous dancing, we returned to our table for a break. I settled into the chair without fully sitting while Linda took a sip from her glass of wine before excusing herself to the ladies' room. As I envisioned future bliss, watching my lovely mate gracefully sway her hips, I realized I wasn't the sole observer of her charms. Seated alone at a corner table on the opposite side of the dance floor was a very good-looking guy, attentively observing Linda's every step. Briefly, I thought I saw her make eye contact with him, prompting me to wonder if they knew each other. As she disappeared into the restroom, the guy seemed to glance in my direction with a smug look, though it was challenging to confirm from that distance. The venue being strictly a dance club, I pondered why a guy would come alone, concluding that, like Linda, his date was probably in the ladies' room. I kept a watchful eye on him while awaiting my beautiful wife's return. Walking past him on her way back, I was certain I saw them both smile and exchange glances. Suddenly, all my suspicions resurfaced. "Honey, would you mind getting me another glass of wine? This one is stale," Linda requested as she sat down. Already feeling uneasy, I didn't like the idea of Linda sitting alone while I waited at the bar for a busy bartender to fill my order. Looking around, I caught the eye of a barmaid. I'd swear Linda looked disappointed as the young lady came to the table to take our drink order. I had a sense that the evening was taking a turn for the worse, I could feel it in my bones. Glancing back, I noticed the guy in the corner still sitting alone. I inquired about him, catching Linda by surprise. There was a momentary panic in her eyes before she composed herself, but I could tell from her uncomfortable tone that I was on to something. I pressed further, asking about the guy she was supposedly making eyes at on the way to the bathroom. She countered innocently, denying that she had been looking at anyone. As our drinks arrived, I saw her eyes quickly flick over my shoulder. Mr. Lonely walked up to our table and, without even acknowledging me, asked her to dance. I immediately declined. That drew a response from him, claiming he was talking to the lady. I retorted that the lady was my wife, and I decide who she can and can't dance with. Linda chimed in, accusing me of being rude. I questioned her about knowing the guy, catching her off guard. She hesitated and then explained that he was the one she had mentioned before. I expressed my frustration, stating that he had asked her to dance without acknowledging me, deeming it not just rude but extremely disrespectful. Mr. Lonely attempted to interject, but I cut him off, telling him I didn't need his input. Turning back to Linda, I continued, saying that if he had asked if I would mind them dancing together, I might have said okay, but now there was no chance. She responded with an edge to her voice, calling me silly and asserting that nothing was going on between them. She reminded me that while we were married, I didn't own her, and she wasn't my slave. If she wanted to dance with someone, she would. I couldn't believe my wife was speaking to me like that, displaying a level of disrespect she had never shown before. I was furious, and any hopes of a romantic evening with her disappeared. Despite my anger, I tried to hold my temper as she continued speaking. Linda expressed a desire for fun in a much sweeter tone. I reminded her that it was our anniversary and that I wanted to have fun with her, watching her dance with someone else wasn't my idea of fun, especially after I had asked her not to dance with him. I acknowledged that I didn't own her and that I couldn't stop her from dancing with him. However, I warned her that if she did, she should get him to take her home because I would be gone. After 12 years together, I could read Linda like a book, and as she looked into my face, her expression was one of anger, though I was surprised she couldn't see the same in mine. I mentioned the impoliteness of making the gentleman stand there while we argued. Linda snapped back, declaring she would dance with him and that we could talk about it later. The guy had a triumphant smirk as he extended his hand for her to take. Linda placed her hand in his, and they walked to the dance floor together. I left before they even started dancing, and I doubt they noticed my departure. 8 blocks away, my cell phone rang. In a contrite voice, Linda inquired about my whereabouts. I mentioned that I was on my way home to pack a bag. She questioned why and where I was going. I responded that I didn't know yet but was determined to get away. I had had enough. Linda expressed disbelief over my decision, emphasizing that it was just a dance, and one lousy dance at that. She questioned whether I intended to throw 12 years of marriage down the drain over a dance. I clarified that it had nothing to do with the dance, mentioning my concerns about our relationship. I shared my suspicion of her potential infidelity, particularly with the man she had just danced with. I pointed out the lack of respect he showed, similar to that of someone involved with a married woman. Linda, now speaking in a softer voice, denied any wrongdoing, expressing love and respect for me. I challenged her, citing the absence of intimacy between us for over 2 weeks, her disengagement during our encounters, and her recent grumpiness. I accused her of not respecting me, highlighting her behavior that evening. The phone remained silent until she finally apologized. She acknowledged her actions, expressing regret for how she had behaved that night and for giving the impression of an affair. Linda admitted to noticing the man and exchanging glances while dancing but insisted that it meant nothing. She pleaded for me to come back and pick her up. I refused, reiterating my decision to leave. I reminded her of my warning, that if she danced with that guy, she would need to find her own way home. I informed her that I was pulling into our driveway and intended to be gone by the time she arrived. I suggested that if she was having an affair, perhaps she should go home with the other man and forget about me. Linda pleaded with me, expressing her desperation and assuring me that she was not having an affair. She suggested grabbing a cab and asked me to stay put until she got home, emphasizing the need to talk things out. Despite the earlier tension, her tone had changed significantly. She begged for understanding before hanging up. I pulled into our drive, went upstairs, and packed a bag. I was out of the house in 12 minutes flat. I wondered if she was really going to take a cab home or if the guy would drop her off. So, I drove down the block, turned off my lights, and waited to see. About 15 minutes later, a yellow cab pulled into the drive. Linda got out and ran into the house. I saw what I wanted to see, so I took off for a motel. Almost immediately, my phone started to ring again. I turned it off. I still had no proof of infidelity, but I had very strong suspicions. I was almost positive Linda and the guy she danced with knew each other. I thought now might be the time for that private detective. If I wasn't home, maybe she'd go to her lover for consoling. The next day, I went through the yellow pages and found the PI with the best ad. I went down to his office and gave him a retainer. After that, I went into work. Tracy, my secretary, told me to call my wife immediately. She said Linda had called 20 times already, and something was definitely wrong. I explained that Linda and I were having problems and that I was not going to return her calls. I directed Tracy to convey that message during her next call. I also phoned the receptionist in the front lobby, instructing her not to allow Linda access to the offices if she were to come by. I aimed to give the private investigator a chance to uncover information. Now it was simply a waiting game. Later that afternoon, Andrea, our neighbor, called. Though I anticipated the topic would be Linda, I answered to avoid seeming impolite. Linda's friend Andrea initiated the conversation, explaining Linda's efforts to apologize and my refusal to talk to her. I affirmed that I had nothing to discuss with Linda. Andrea sighed slightly, mentioning Linda's denial of any infidelity and urging me not to believe such suspicions. I admitted to believing Linda might be cheating, citing her peculiar behavior for over 2 months and the events of the other night. Andrea questioned my conviction, as Linda insisted they only danced. I clarified that I witnessed them exchanging looks before the guy approached our table, behaving rudely. Linda sided with him, and despite my warning, she danced with him. I expressed my suspicion that they were romantically involved. Andrea attempted to reassure me, claiming she had not observed any evidence of cheating and emphasizing Linda's acknowledgement of her mistake. She pleaded with me to talk to Linda, insisting that avoidance wouldn't solve anything. I acknowledged Andrea's point but requested time for contemplation. I asked her to convey that I would call Linda in a couple of weeks. Andrea promised to deliver the message, urging me to call Linda. After our conversation, I pondered Andrea's words. Despite the doubts, I couldn't picture her lying to me. Over the next 2 weeks, I remained on edge, checking in with the investigator, who had no updates. Eventually, he called me to his office and handed over a manila packet. Opening it with shaky hands, he instructed me to skip to the bottom of page 5 for the essential information. Nervously flipping through the pages, I reached the bottom of page 5. The proof? After an exhaustive investigation, this office found no evidence supporting the client's suspicions of spousal infidelity. I was dumbfounded. Unsure how to react, I looked back up at the man across the desk. I inquired about the certainty of the investigator's findings. He assured me that they had tracked Linda's every move for the past 2 weeks, employing house surveillance, call monitoring, tailing her outings, and checking phone records and credit card statements. He conveyed that there were no signs of an affair. Overwhelmed with relief, I struggled to hold back tears in his office. The investigator advised me to go home to my wife and child, emphasizing the rarity of happy endings in his line of work. Expressing my gratitude, I left and returned to my motel room, needing time to process everything. Over the weekend, I reflected on every detail. On Monday morning, I called Linda. She answered weakly and shakily. I identified myself and asked if she was okay, expressing concern about how unwell she sounded. After a short pause, Linda apologized, admitting regret for taking me for granted. She acknowledged that I was right to warn the guy at the club and started crying again, confessing her lack of respect despite loving and respecting me. Linda pleaded for another chance, vowing never to make the same mistake. Her plea surprised me, considering her attitude at the dance club. When I didn't respond immediately, she assumed the worst. "You're not coming back, are you?" she asked. "Yes, I am," I reassured her, clarifying that it would be on a trial basis. I expressed my desire to have my original wife back, the woman I fell in love with and married. Linda insisted that she was still here, waiting for the man she loves. Skeptical, I mentioned the bad attitudes, lack of passion, and disrespect I had experienced over the past 2 months. Despite her sincerity, I remained unconvinced. I informed her that I would collect my belongings from the motel after work and be home that night. After a moment of silence, she expressed her love for me and apologized for the way she had treated me. She conveyed her deep regret and emphasized her fear of losing me. I can't say I didn't still have reservations. I was still upset, and even with all the evidence to the contrary, I just couldn't shake the feeling that Linda knew that guy at the dance hall. After work, I picked up my clothes and went home. Jennifer came running and almost tackled me at the door. She asked where I had been. I explained that I had been out of town for a while. She obviously knew nothing of our problems. Linda was right there too. She put her arms around me and showered me with kisses. I kissed her back passionately. In the end, I couldn't deny that I loved my wife. That was 2 years ago, and married life has been wonderful again. Linda is once more the woman I married, both in and out of the bedroom. A couple of months ago, she threw me a surprise birthday party. In the past, we always treated Linda's birthday as a special day but only started celebrating mine after my return home. Last night was our 14th wedding anniversary, and this time Linda planned the entire evening. When I returned home from work, she surprised me with tickets to a dinner playhouse to see Man of La Mancha, one of my favorite plays. Later, we drove down to the lakefront and walked along the beach, enjoying the moonlight and warm breezes from the lake. Expressing gratitude for the wonderful anniversary, I put my arm around her and pulled her close. She coyly acknowledged the arousal in my voice, and I agreed that we should head home to address it. About half an hour later, we were in our bedroom, lost in each other's arms. To this day, I remain uncertain if she was cheating on me. I'll probably never know for sure, but I'm glad I chose to come back home. Although spring had officially begun on the calendar a few weeks prior, it was only on this day that I could venture out without my winter coat, marking the end of another Chicago winter. Stepping outside, I inhaled the lingering fresh scent of morning dew from an overnight April shower. I fondly remembered the warm, secure feeling of being wrapped in my husband's arms while listening to the gentle rhythm of the rain. On my way to the car, I marveled at the beautiful blue wildflowers resiliently growing in the lawn. Despite the severity of the winter, they persisted in their pursuit of a new beginning, a fresh start at life. Each spring, I would sing along with the car radio on my way to a quaint coffee shop to meet Kathy, a good friend I hadn't seen in a while. Kathy's son was the same age as Jennifer, my daughter. We became fast friends years ago at a school function and have remained close ever since. Kathy, already seated at a small table in the corner by the window, waved and smiled through the glass as I passed on my way to the front door. The aroma of fresh brewed coffee filled the busy cafe as I joined the line of customers waiting for my cup of Colombian heaven. Spotting me, Kathy stood up. We greeted each other warmly with giggles as we hugged before taking our seats. I remarked that it had been a while and inquired about how she had been. Kathy's eyes sparkled as she answered me. The conversation flowed, encompassing old times and laughter over amusing incidents at school functions. As we discussed our children, we both acknowledged how quickly they grow up. About an hour into our conversation, Kathy leaned over the table and lowered her voice. I mimed locking my lips with a key and responded, "What's up?" Kathy explained that she had been kind of seeing a guy. My head snapped up from sipping my coffee as I met her eyes. "What do you mean by, kind of seeing this guy? Are you having an affair?" I asked. Kathy responded with an impish half-smile. She shared that she hadn't done anything yet but was considering having a fling with a guy named Cody. She acknowledged the naughtiness of it but expressed feeling alive when with him. She admitted liking Cody and feared he might lose interest if they didn't become more involved. In response, I asked if she was willing to risk her marriage for him. Kathy clarified that she had no intention of marrying Cody and just wanted a little fling, referring to it as the spice of life. With a smile, she assured me that she would make sure her husband, Bruce, wouldn't find out, emphasizing how it would crush him if he knew she was with someone else. Kathy added that Cody was married too, highlighting the need for both of them to be cautious. For the past 2 years, I had harbored a secret that remained undisclosed, with no intention of sharing it with anyone. As I looked at my friend, I made the decision to take a risk. Recalling the past, I asked Kathy to think back to a couple of years ago when Harry and I were going through a rough patch. He actually left me for a while. Kathy acknowledged remembering it but mentioned she never knew the details. I confessed that I never disclosed it to anyone and emphasized the importance of her promise to keep it a secret. After a moment, Kathy assured me that she promised not to reveal it, understanding the potential impact on her own marriage. As a waitress brought fresh coffee, I waited until our cups were filled before continuing. I shared that after 12 years of marriage, I felt a sense of boredom with everything becoming routine. It was strange, considering all those years had passed, and I found myself questioning what I was doing and where I was going. I felt stuck, lacking a real life for myself. Kathy interjected, expressing understanding of my feelings. She shared that she knew precisely how I felt, believing that most women experience similar emotions. It wasn't about not loving our husbands, she emphasized that she loved Harry with all her heart. However, suddenly, it seemed like that love wasn't enough, and something was missing. She admitted slipping into a slight depression where nothing seemed fun anymore, not even intimacy. Despite Harry going above and beyond for her, especially in the bedroom, she couldn't find happiness. Even school functions became a drag, she added. After taking a sip of my coffee and glancing at Kathy to gauge if my story was resonating, I could see that I had her attention, so I continued. I then met Terry. I confirmed it with a slight nod when Kathy asked if I had an affair. I admitted that it was an emotional affair, expressing relief that it hadn't escalated into something physical. I sighed and conveyed gratitude for that. I described Terry as gorgeous, with rugged good looks, sandy blonde hair, and flashing blue eyes like Robert Redford. He was tall, standing over 6 feet, and even with his clothes on, I could tell he had a nice build. I acknowledged that I was staring but couldn't bring myself to look away until he caught me. I blushed when he looked at me and smiled, and we started to flirt with each other. The experience was exciting and felt a bit wicked. Eventually, I came to my senses and continued with my shopping down the produce aisle. Recapping, I recounted the encounter when I reached for some tomatoes and accidentally bumped into him. He greeted me with those captivating blue eyes and a charming smile, saying, "Hi." Uncomfortably, I admitted to Kathy that I felt a physical response, which embarrassed me. Hoping he wouldn't notice, I blushed and recalled the awkward moment. Despite observing my wedding rings, he extended his hand for a shake and introduced himself. Surprisingly, his awareness of my status didn't dissuade him from expressing interest, and I found it flattering that someone like him could be attracted to me. We continued our conversation and shared jokes as we moved through the aisles, gathering the items we needed. Upon reaching the checkout, he offered me his number, suggesting I call him for lunch the following week. Kathy was now hanging on every word of my story, expressing how familiar it sounded. Almost prompted to toss Terry's card away as I left the store, my thoughts echoed, "Yeah right, I'm going to call you, and we're going to have this intensely romantic affair, and then my husband will finish off both of us." I admitted that I didn't throw his card away but kept it in my purse. On the way home, my mind was consumed with thoughts of Terry. When Harry arrived home as I was putting away groceries, I already felt guilty and snapped at him when he tried to help. It seemed like an unconscious defense mechanism. Poor Harry asked if something was wrong. In response to Kathy's eager question about what I said, I confessed that I lied, telling Harry I was just a little tired from shopping. In truth, I was secretly walking on cloud 9. Continuing my narrative, I acknowledged that I knew I shouldn't call Terry, considering it was wrong and that I was vulnerable due to my emotions. Despite telling myself no, I couldn't resist the temptation. I found one of the last payphones in the city and dialed the number on Terry's card. We arranged to have lunch the following day. With anxious anticipation, Kathy waited for me to take another sip of coffee before continuing. On our way to the restaurant, I shared with Kathy that my emotions were all over the place, terrified and excited simultaneously, not to mention feeling incredibly aroused. During our conversation, Terry reached across the table and held my hand, evoking that familiar feeling of excitement. It felt like being a kid on my first date. Despite a strong desire to be closer to him, my conscience, or perhaps fear, held me back, and I couldn't bring myself to go further. In response to my sharing, Kathy noted that Terry persisted in his attempts to seduce me, discussing Harry without recognizing the value of the woman he had and failing to appreciate me. She admitted to being influenced by his words, leading to resentment towards her own husband. In a short span, Terry successfully convinced her that Harry was taking her for granted, resonating with the situation she believed she was currently facing. I explained my motive for sharing all this with Kathy, expressing a desire for her to be aware of the situation she might be getting into. Curious, I inquired if the guy she was seeing had begun talking about Bruce yet. Kathy shook her head, asserting that there were no issues in her marriage. However, in the brief pause that followed, I sensed a subtle uncertainty lingering in her words. Continuing our conversation, I probed deeper, asking if she too had started to question her situation. Kathy acknowledged the growing realization, prompting me to reflect on my own experiences. I explained to her how, when Harry left, he pointed out my constant irritability, which I had been unaware of for over 2 months. This pattern extended to the bedroom, where I found it challenging to muster passion for a man who appeared to take me for granted. As I continued with my story, I could see understanding slowly spreading across Kathy's face. I urged her to consider the situation and asked, "Think about it, Kathy. What kind of man has an affair with a married woman? Can you imagine Bruce doing it?" "Bruce? No, of course not. He'd never do anything like that," Kathy affirmed, seeking validation. I then questioned her, "So why risk your marriage over someone who would?" While Kathy pondered the recent revelations, I continued sharing my story. Anyway, we had lunch again the next week, and remaining faithful to Harry became increasingly challenging. By the third lunch, Terry almost persuaded me to go back to his apartment. Seeing his frustration with my excuses, I realized that another lunch might lead us to a place we shouldn't go. As we left the restaurant after that third lunch, I casually mentioned my need for a new dress, as Harry was planning to take me out for our anniversary. I spoke of a dance club where we used to have fun, and Terry seized the opportunity. Arrogantly, he declared his intention to be there and dance with me, claiming it would teach Harry a lesson about my desirability. Despite my objections, he insisted it could make Harry appreciate me more. Kathy expressed disbelief and concern, asking if Terry had actually shown up. I confirmed that he did, revealing that I noticed him as soon as we entered the venue. Despite the awkward situation, I refrained from saying anything, not wanting to spoil the enjoyable time Harry and I were having. However, matters took a turn when Terry approached and invited me to dance. Kathy reacted with shock, whispering in astonishment, "Oh my God." To make matters worse, Terry completely ignored Harry and behaved rudely towards him. Understandably, Harry became defensive and issued an ultimatum, insisting that I couldn't dance with Terry. Stubbornly, I got angry and declared my intention to dance with Terry anyway. Despite Harry's warning that he wouldn't be there when I returned from the dance floor, I dismissed it. As we began dancing, I confronted Terry about his rude behavior in front of Harry, questioning why he had to act that way. Terry explained that he wanted to put Harry in his place, further fueling my anger. Despite Terry holding me close on the dance floor, my primary concern was that Harry was watching, and I feared how upset he must have been. I was so preoccupied that I didn't even realize the first dance had ended and we were already on to our second. When the dance was over, I told Terry not to ask for any more. I insisted I was going to spend the rest of the evening with my husband. On my way back to the table, I noticed Terry was following me. I confronted him, asking what he thought he was doing. He claimed he wanted to apologize to Harry. Upon returning to the table, Harry wasn't there. Terry sat down, stating he'd wait with me until Harry returned. I doubted he had any intention of apologizing. It seemed more like he wanted to toy with Harry some more. "Why?" Kathy asked. "Why would he want to do that?" I thought about it and concluded that since he hadn't succeeded in getting me into bed yet, he wanted to create trouble between Harry and me. I was sure he hoped I'd turn to him for comfort, imagining he could console me. As the night wore on, I suspected Harry was in the men's room. I told Terry to go back to his table, but he kept stalling. When the waitress came over, he ordered us drinks. That's when she asked if we wanted to start another tab. I wondered aloud about the first tab, questioning its necessity. She explained that Harry had paid it before his sudden departure, leaving me stunned and feeling abandoned. As I narrated the events, Kathy's face mirrored my distress, and her own emotions began to surface. A solitary tear escaped from Kathy's eye and rolled down her cheek. Kathy voiced concern, suggesting we stop discussing it given my emotional state. Despite her suggestion, I insisted on sharing the whole story, believing it was crucial for her to know. I continued, recalling how, in the aftermath, I reached out to Harry, urging him to return and pick me up. That's when he dropped the bombshell, suspecting an affair, particularly with Terry. Harry declared his intention to pack a bag, leaving me uncertain about his return. I reached for a napkin, dabbing my eyes as I explained to Kathy how the realization hit me with overwhelming force. It was as if someone had suddenly turned on the lights, bringing everything into sharp focus. I acknowledged that it wasn't Harry taking me for granted, rather, it was me taking him, Jennifer, and our life together for granted. The weight of risking my entire marriage over someone undeserving struck me. Despite pleading with Harry to return for a conversation, he refused, leaving me with no choice but to call a cab. Kathy, curious about Terry's role in the situation, asked what he had been doing. I shared that Terry persisted, claiming Harry didn't deserve me and urging me to go home with him. I chuckled as I recounted telling him to drop dead. Even after that strong dismissal, Terry tried one last time outside as the cab pulled in. He attempted to kiss me. In response, I swiftly delivered a knee to his groin, warning him of an inappropriate contact suit if he ever tried to contact me again. Kathy reached over, offering support as I wiped away more tears. Recounting the events, I shared how upon reaching home, I discovered Harry had left. My attempts to contact him were futile as his cell was turned off. The fear of my marriage unraveling and losing everything we had built overwhelmed me. It was the most scared I had ever been. Desperation led me to confide in Andrea, our neighbor, hoping Harry might open up to her. He did, but his only response was the need for time to think, promising to call in a couple of weeks. Realizing pressure would backfire, I decided to give him space, enduring what felt like the worst 2 weeks of my life. In the presence of our daughter Jennifer, I maintained a facade of strength, explaining that Daddy was out of town. Yet in moments of solitude, tears flowed uncontrollably. I feared I had irreparably damaged my relationship with Harry, especially if he believed I was unfaithful. In tears, I apologized to Kathy, finding it difficult to discuss even now. After a deep breath, I continued sharing the painful journey. As I revealed the details, I emphasized how close I came to losing everything and how it made me realize the significance of what I had. Love, I emphasized to Kathy, had to surpass lust. The love between Harry and me was irreplaceable, and I considered myself incredibly fortunate. Kathy responded in a contemplative tone, expressing understanding and admitting she wouldn't know how to handle her husband leaving. When asked if I ever told Harry the truth, I explained that I couldn't risk it, given how close I came to losing him. Living in constant fear of him discovering the truth, I emphasized how I've tried to be the best wife since the day he came home, no longer taking him or our marriage for granted. I expressed gratitude daily and showed Harry my appreciation with sincere love and affection. Despite the lingering fear, I could only hope that my efforts would be enough if he ever discovered the truth. Kathy reassured me with a comforting squeeze of the hand, expressing gratitude for sharing my story and helping her avoid a potential mistake. Grateful for the conversation, we discussed tentative plans for our next meeting before parting ways. I felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing I had prevented my friend from making a regrettable decision. Upon arriving home, I had ample time to welcome my daughter Jennifer with a kiss and an after-school snack, reflecting on how quickly she was growing up. I marveled at the passage of time, realizing she would soon be 10 years old. Time flies, I thought to myself. When Harry returned from work, I greeted him warmly with hugs and kisses. It struck me that I had never opened up about that painful period in our marriage until that day. Conversing with Kathy served as a reminder of the wonderful life Harry and I had built together. Later that night, as Harry lay beside me, peacefully asleep, I turned on my side, propping myself up on my elbow, and traced the lines on his face, each one telling a story of the years we'd shared. With a delicate touch, I followed the faint outline of a few, my heart swelling with love and admiration for the man lying next to me. Leaning down, I pressed my lips to his, and to my delight, his smile met mine. He pulled me into a warm embrace, his arms wrapping around me. Whispering, I expressed my surprise, thinking he was asleep. Harry chuckled, revealing he had been deep in thought about Jennifer's upcoming birthday. When I suggested a baby brother or sister for her, it wasn't entirely unexpected, we had discussed it before without reaching a decision. His smile seemed to signal an end to that debate. With Jennifer's birthday just 2 months away, I playfully hinted at getting started. Harry's broad smile indicated he was on board. 2 months later, we celebrated Jennifer's 10th birthday with a big backyard party, inviting all her friends and ensuring plenty of ice cream and cake for everyone. After the festivities, we surprised our daughter with an additional lavish gift, the news of a new baby brother joining our family. Story 2. Hang in there, little brother. Commander Direct pressed his unshaven cheek against him, then pulled away. He patted his shoulder and tried to look into his eyes. The fighters who were leaving had left him a few grenades and full magazines. They shook hands, hiding their eyes guiltily, realizing that they would never meet him again in this world. Finally, the farewell was over, and the squad carrying away the wounded left. Over the past, Derek had much to do. He began to carry stones and stack them on the berm, leaving an embrasure large enough to fire. When he was done, he pulled his favorite Tonto out of its sheath and placed it next to him. After a moment's thought, he did the same with his pistol, smoked a little in his sleeve, realizing that it didn't make any difference, and began to look around with binoculars. There was no other way through the pass, they would surely come this way and run into him. Derek grinned. Maybe life was the end, maybe it would be decent. Half an hour later, he spotted the scouts. 3 new recruits were walking down the path rather nonchalantly, almost undisguised, confident that they had nowhere to go. Derek smoothly pressed the trigger, as he had been taught. A short burst of gunfire cut the silence. 2 of the recruits fell as if they had hit an invisible barrier. The third rushed back, shouting something gutturally. The enemy lay down and returned heavy fire. Bullets squealed overhead and struck the rocks, showering him with granite splinters. Derek fired single shots carefully, saving ammunition, but the enemy immediately recognized this and spread out, hiding behind large rocks. Their dense return fire kept Derek's head down. Several lead bullets had already struck near the embrasure. Looks like they're taking aim, a thought flashed through his mind. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of a bearded recruit aiming a grenade launcher at him. Without thinking, he tore the ring, and a grenade fell next to the bandit. There was an explosion and silence. Derek realized that it would not last long now, the bandits would come to their senses and regroup. It would start all over again. He wondered if his men had made it to the helicopter in time. One thing he realized, as long as everything went smoothly, the most important thing was not to die too soon, otherwise, it would all be for nothing. Gradually, it was getting dark. Here in the mountains, it gets dark earlier than on the plains. Derek could no longer distinguish his enemies well, they seemed to be trying to encircle him, hesitating to make one last attack. Finally, they did. The recruits got up and began to approach the trench in short runs, gradually narrowing the ring. They were already less than 100 meters away. Derek began to fire short bursts, trying to pin the enemy to the rocks. For a while, he succeeded. Finally, he used up the last grenade. He was hit in the head, and hot blood was pouring down his face. He wiped it off with the palm of his hand and laid on his back. He attached the last magazine. The starry sky stared at him indifferently, in haphazard patterns from the stars. For some reason, tears came to his eyes. Men don't cry. Good thing no one could see him. Derek turned onto his stomach again and nestled into the scope of his automatic rifle. Each time he pulled the trigger, he saw that there were fewer and fewer enemies. The loss of blood was making him dizzy and draining his strength, but he didn't let himself relax. When he ran out of ammunition, clutching a knife in his left hand and a pistol in his right, he went up for one last attack. As the helicopter flew over the border, the fighters sat with their backs against the vibrating hull, not knowing if Direct was still alive to cover their retreat. Dozens of kilometers away, in the distant mountains, shots could still be heard. As I entered the reception area, I caught the frightened look in the secretary's eyes. She jumped out from behind her desk and blocked the entrance to the office with her body. Jenny asked me not to let anyone in. She's very busy. She almost spread her arms out, trying to block my way. I shifted the folder in my left hand and, with my right, gently moved her aside. It's okay, Zora. This doesn't apply to me, I said as I pushed down on the handle and pulled the door toward me. My wife jumped up quickly from the couch against the wall, struggling to button her blouse. The man to her right, a man of stately proportions, didn't move from his seat, continuing to stare at me with a cocky grin. Eric, what are you doing here? I told you, she took a big gulp of air, no one gets in. I went on for her. I thought that didn't apply to me. The man stood up, adjusting his jacket, and headed for the door. Jenny, we'll talk later, he smiled victoriously. I'm waiting for your call. The playboy bypassed me as if I were an unimportant character and walked out. My wife sank into a chair. Why are you barging into my office without knocking? Jenny tried to master the situation. You're undermining my authority as an executive, and making out with another man during work hours does not undermine your authority. I was still standing in front of Jenny, trying to process what had happened. By the way, I brought you your quarterly report. Was it really necessary to barge into my office? Jenny was already speaking in her usual commanding tone. By the way, I have some questions for you. In the last 6 months, your numbers have almost halved. I can't tolerate the state of affairs any longer. You should be fired for this kind of work. The best defense is offense. It's all about changing the subject. Jenny finally came to her senses, realizing that her husband was a dummy and wouldn't scandalize. So, what's the deal? Fire him? Should I write a letter of resignation now, or will you fire me by article? I was getting angry. You'll feel freer with lovers, she's blushing. Get out. The dismissal order will be today, and don't bother. My driver will bring your things. She stood up, seething with rage. We'll talk about our lives at home. I shrugged and walked out. I'm a bastard, and I'm supposed to be under my wife's heel and smile politely at her suitors. I walked past the embarrassed secretary and out of the reception area. My personal belongings were scarce in the office. I quickly threw them into a box and, throwing on my coat, went to the exit. Hey, where are you going? My boss asked me in a bewildered manner. Home. I don't work here anymore. Politely I smiled and waved him off. Hold on, Eric. A lot of orders are closing on you. Customers will leave us if you quit, the chief mumbled confusedly, trying to hold me back. That's okay. You'll take over. I opened the doors and stepped out into the hallway. The employees I met looked at me with regret. The news of my dismissal spread quickly through the office. The workers had a new topic of discussion. I handed my pass to the guard at the gate and walked outside, savoring the frosty air of freedom. Are you out of your mind, Jenny, firing your own husband? Leoma even jumped up and down in her chair. What's your father gonna say? Oh, Leona, he won't say anything. I think my dad sees who I'm married to. A bum is a bum. Anybody else would have made a scene, slapped Hubert on the neck. Jenny even blushed with righteous anger. But this one stands there with his eyes downcast, he's mumbling. But what kind of a man is that? Jenny, you have children. Why are you provoking your husband? The woman you're talking to has forgotten all about the coffee. He's a good-looking man. Look, you'll find someone who's interested in him in no time. Leona, please, who wants him? I don't know, Jenny, you can't go wrong. By the way, are the kids his or not? Leona looked into Jenny's face. She remained silent, pretending not to hear the question. Obviously, inconvenient questions should be ignored. What a fool, Leona thought. The husband, the gold, is always at home with the kids, almost never drinks, adores his wife, and she freaks out, can't find a place for herself. Well, dear, I'll run. I've got a lot to do. Leona got up and kissed her friend on the cheek. Bye-bye. Jenny's cell phone rang. "Dad," the woman made a disgruntled grimace. "Daughter, hi. What's going on with the contracts?" "Eric brought you the contracts." Dad got right to the point. "He's good, by the way. He got CUCKOLD. He's ready to work with us, but he wants Eric to calculate all the risks and contact him tomorrow. So, give your husband a little treat tonight, he deserves it." "Yeah, I'm having a little closing party tonight. I'll see you and Eric, we'll have some good meat and wine." "I'll be waiting," Dad laughed and passed out. Oh, Jenny even swore. She realized that after what had happened in her office, her husband wouldn't go anywhere with her. His Highness had taken offense. "But it's all right. I shouldn't have put him under my thumb." She called a car and left the firm to the deputy and went home to rectify the situation. "To your father's party, Jenny? Are you crazy? Take your Hubert, especially since you're already openly involved with him." I stood with my back to her, concentrating on pouring bourbon into a glass. I looked at the light, admiring the rich color of the drink, and took my time drinking to the bottom, swallowing even the ice cubes. To be honest, I don't understand anything about this moonshine, but I had to keep the antlers. Eric cut the crap. "Hubert is just our partner. We don't and can't have a relationship." I hesitated, searching for the right word. "I only love you." Strangely, I found her words ambiguous. "Dad really asked for us to be together. He wants to talk to you about something." Jenny kissed me on the lips, imitating an unheard of passion, and went to get dressed. I stood there for a while pondering, then went to the bathroom, deciding to shave. As I passed our bedroom through the half-open door, I heard my wife's soft voice. Jenny was on the phone, trying not to attract my attention. "Yes, it's all right. He's incapable of jealousy. Make sure you come over, we'll have time," she giggled softly. "Oh, come on, just you." Kisses. I walked quickly to the bathroom. When we arrived, the party was in full swing. It gets dark early in October, so the front lawn of my father-in-law's house was lit up with colorful lights. For a while, my wife and I jostled among the guests, pretending to be a loving couple. Then Jenny called her mother, and I walked over to a group of men huddled around a barbecue. The tantalizing aroma of roasting meat wafted across the lawn. I was still far away when I heard a familiar voice. "She's quite a woman, we'll be fine," the recent brash Hubert was laughingly telling something to the couch tankers surrounding him. "What about the husband?" someone asked. "The husband, you idiot, he'll keep a candle for us," smugly said Hubert. "You should have seen that cuckold." I stood behind him and listened intently. "She's a good girl," Hubert continued to rat. "Yeah, he's an elephant, can't Jenny see who she's messing with?" I thought. At that moment, the laughter stopped, and everyone turned to me. "Oh, you idiot," Hubert said mockingly. "Where's your wife?" "Her mother called me to talk to her." Embarrassed, I whispered. "And who were you talking about?" "Her, my own." Hubert laughed, but the standing tankers did not support him. An ominous silence hung in the air. Hubert was even surprised at this turn of events. He looked at me, but it was too late to retreat. He was losing face. "Run, call her here, say I'm calling." He pushed me in the shoulder. It all happened very quickly. There was a crunch and Hubert, awkwardly cradling his arm, suddenly fell onto the red-hot brazier. His right cheek touched the iron, red from the heat, the distinctive odor of burning leather was emitted. He lay motionless for a while, his cheek burning, and then he fell awkwardly into the grass, wet with the evening dew. Several men rushed to him, trying to help him. The bright red cheek was clearly visible in the evening twilight. No one realized what had happened. Everyone started yelling, "Call an ambulance." I shouted the loudest. Yes, poor Hubert, he got instant karma, 2 in 1, a broken right arm and a toasted cheek. I wonder which hand he was holding the glass with. My car, rubber crunching on brick splinters, pulled up to the abandoned shop. I left the party without waiting for the denouement. I decided to spend the night out of the house tonight, at one time a bankrupt factory of metal constructions located on the outskirts of the city and surrounded by a grove of birch trees. I bought it for a small price, it was only my acquisition. Neither my father-in-law nor my wife had any idea about my purchase. Only a few people knew about the abandoned factory, and that's mostly those who were tidying it up. Or rather not the whole factory, but only the second floor of the assembly shop. I invested a certain amount of money and remodeled this best-preserved building into a rather comfortable place to live. I installed security cameras, monitoring almost the entire perimeter of the plant. I also put the cameras I had at home in my bedroom and living room here. When I installed them, I didn't think about my wife's infidelity, just in case. I didn't realize it would be so soon. I wonder how long she's been with that. 6 months? A year? But what does it matter? The most important thing is to have time to pull off the plan and then to please his beloved wife. Why feel sorry for her? So, let's play the fool for now. The living quarters occupied the entire second floor of the abandoned shop. I took out an old refrigerator, an empty bottle of vodka, and poured myself a third of a glass. I picked up a pickle with my fork, that's what I like, not like stinky Irish moonshine. Pouring myself another drink, I set the alarm and lay down on the couch. I should get some rest, I'd had a rough day. I lived in a happy family for 5 years, that's exactly how long it was before the tragic accident that changed my fate for the worse. Until the day my father was killed in a car accident. My mother didn't grieve for long, turns out she'd already had a lover on the side for a year and a half. That's what she called her, Michael. There were 2 of us kids, me and my sister. We were twins, a boy and a girl. My mother took Mary and drove off with her new husband into the bright distance, leaving me in the care of my grandmother. I didn't fare too well with my grandmother for 3 years, until she died. At the funeral, the prodigal mom showed up dressed to the hilt. She quickly sold my grandmother's apartment and put me in boarding school. I was already 8 years old, and I knew exactly what was going on. My mother came with my sister, who tried her best to stay away from me. She was a princess, I wasn't eager to show any brotherly feelings either. In my memory, I will always remember the candy-munching princess-dressed girl who called me a beggar. There was a lot of priggishness in her when she gave me a caramel, throwing it under my feet, with this look on her face like, eat it. Having thrown me to the boarding school, my mother and sister quickly disappeared. I was left alone in the whole world. I won't describe my life, I've been there. But one thing I learned quickly, if you don't protect yourself, no one will. I learned to beat my way through life with my fists. During the whole time I was in boarding school, my mother never visited me. Apparently, she didn't care about me. After finishing 11th grade, I asked to join the army. The service was easy for me, so after a year of service, I entered a military school. Serving in the army, I had to wander around the hot spots of the collapsing country and the world. During one operation, I was wounded in the head. The wound itself was not dangerous, but my face was disfigured. At the expense of the state, I had several plastic surgeries, changing my appearance beyond recognition. Even my voice had changed, becoming more masculine. When I looked at myself in the mirror after the last plastic surgery, I even liked myself. A brutal man looked at me from the mirror, proofed by life and tempered by the cadence. I guess that's when I had a plan to get the Heartless and her daughter together. I didn't know exactly what I'd do or how I'd get my revenge, but I was sure my revenge would be terrible. No, I wasn't going to take anyone's life, I just wanted to make their existence unbearable, just like mine had been. When my contract was up, I was discharged to the civilian labor force. They shook my hand, gave me a medal and a military ticket, and then I was safely forgotten. By that time, my heartache had dulled, and I did not search for my former sister and mother. God was their judge. I got a job as a mechanic at a service station, first as an apprentice, then as a mechanic. The salary was small, but I had enough. In the fall, I went to school. I entered a technical university. Studying was easy for me. Moreover, I already had an engineering education. A year later, I became a master, and after 2 more years, the owner offered me a share in the business. So, everything was in chocolate. And then, everything happened as it usually does. At a colleague's birthday party, I met Jenny. She was a nice, shy girl, moderately pretty, moderately affectionate. I courted her for almost 6 months until, to my surprise, I realized I was in love. So much so that I couldn't imagine my life without her. She introduced me to her parents. Her father was the owner of a huge construction firm, so my future wife was used to living in comfort. I didn't hide the fact that I spent my childhood wandering around boarding schools. Parents wrinkled their brows, grumbled unhappily, but their daughters did not interfere. Before the new year, we got married. 9 months later, a son was born, and 3 years later, a daughter. By the age of 30, I had become a handsome man. Walking through the city, I caught the interested looks of girls and young women. But I loved my wife without memory. The farther I went, the more I loved her. It's like that, the longer you live with a person, the more you become immersed in them. I loved my wife so much I would have given my life for her, and it wasn't just words. So it was, almost 8 years until I noticed a change in my wife. At some point, things started to change. I was suddenly a worthless loser, unable to support my family. I was working at a service station, deputy director, being the co-owner, and my money was always enough. And now everything's changed. When I came home, the sawmill would turn on, and the psychological processing would begin. That's when the abandoned mill appeared. I spent more and more time there, but I still didn't suspect my wife of cheating on me until one day I saw it all myself on the screen of my monitor. And not only saw but heard what she was saying about me. A year ago, her father got me a job at his firm. That's how I ended up working directly under his deputy, who also happens to be my wife. That's how she finally got me under her thumb. I signed contracts, transferred money, bought equipment, working for myself. First and foremost, I was motivated. Everyone in this family was worth everyone else's money. That's how the plan came back into being, and nothing could derail me from my chosen path. I took sadistic pleasure in preparing escape routes, intending to leave ashes behind. I delighted in playing the role of the cuckold so convincingly that everyone believed it, especially my unfaithful wife. To begin with, I opened offshore accounts where I periodically transferred money to my father-in-law's firms. No one took me seriously, considering me a complete sucker. Then I opened a firm in another city where the funds from the offshore accounts began to flow. This firm was still in the shadows for the time being. A few years after my marriage, a coworker met me and offered me an interesting job abroad in my first specialty, but I refused because I was at the peak of happiness. He left me his business card, saying that people with my profile and training would always be in demand. When the problems with my wife began and I realized that there was no turning back, I dialed my golden boss's number. I got an appointment, and a month later, I went on my first business trip. At the end of it, my account was replenished with a solid sum. I was living life to the fullest while my wife was tumbling around with her Hubert, which I didn't really care about anymore. I had my own business. I often disappeared from the house, earning left-handed money. I was the master of my own destiny, and I didn't care about the reality around me. I was sick of my love. I suffered, burned out inside. That's what happens when you get spit on regularly. I'm not going to talk about women cheating. Women are different, but I've been with one. I don't know what Jenny was hoping to accomplish by humiliating me in the eyes of her lover, her family, and her co-workers, but I must say she was very skillful at it. Putting me down, I only felt sorry for the children, but after all, I wasn't going to take their mother's life. So what happened in there? Stephen looked at his daughter, taking a sip of brandy. I don't know, Dad. When I got there, Hubert was writhing in pain on the grass. Everyone was yelling and calling an ambulance. Jenny looked at her mother confusedly, then looked at her father. She had been afraid of him since childhood, and now she tried not to meet his eyes. "Where was your husband?" her father asked sternly. "He was there too, standing aside as usual," contemptuously replied Jenny. "Why was he supposed to help his wife's lover?" Stephen looked menacingly at his daughter. "How do you know? Only a lazy person doesn't whisper about it. You've lost your head. What do you see in that smug Hubert? Since when did you stop being satisfied with your husband?" My father's indignant voice seemed to float above our heads, rising to the high ceiling. "Dad, Eric is incapable of jealousy. He is incapable of fighting back against anyone. I'm telling you that. I've studied him over time." Jenny poured herself a brandy but didn't drink it. "I have. Where's your husband now? Why isn't he with you?" "I went with Hubert to the hospital. When I got back, Eric was gone." Jenny pulled out her iPhone and dialed her husband's number, but his phone was disconnected. Dad shrugged angrily. "So where is he now, and where does he periodically disappear to?" "He's been gone for weeks. He's taking a vacation at his own expense, or rather he did." Jenny looked guiltily at her father. "What do you mean he's been taking it?" The man looked up. "I fired him." "You did what? Say that again." "I fired him." He was getting cocky. Jenny didn't know what to say and tried to hang on to her words. The father looked at his daughter perplexed. "Are you an idiot?" Jenny lowered her head. "Back in the day when you first started dating Eric, I tried to find out about him. You know I have connections, but no one could find out anything, only one person who works in a very important power structure." My father put his finger up, "told me to stop being interested in Eric because it's fraught." "And you're telling me that he's a pansy?" Jenny looked at her father fearfully. "I was told that your Hubert fell face down on a hot grill after he said some lewd things about you. Do you think that's a coincidence?" Dad was almost screaming. But Eric was far away. Jenny tried to justify herself. "I get the impression that my daughter is an impenetrable fool." Stephen stood up, indicating to Jenny that it was time to go home. Derek thought he heard the rumble of a helicopter engine. The sound was getting closer and closer. No, it wasn't above his head, covering the stars. A ravenous swift bird flew by. The machine began to turn and headed toward the battlefield again. Derek knew why the pilots were slowing and not opening fire. He pulled the metal tube of the rocket launcher out of the masonry, and soon a red rocket flew up to Marcus's position. The helicopter made another circle, and 2 blue arrows came off its bottom, 2 bursts of fire and the thunder of explosions. Shards of rock flew in different directions. Derek lay behind a large rock, hiding from the flying debris. There were no thoughts in his head. He lay huddled on the ground, tears streaming from his eyes, mumbling only one word: ours. In conclusion, this story illuminates the power of choice amidst the complexities of human existence. Through betrayal, truth-seeking, and the resilience of hope, the characters navigate life's challenges, reminding us that our decisions shape our destinies.